Hey everyone, it's Alex, and we're talking about the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap, and we're getting started with Loki Collector at a 65% win rate and a nearly 20% market share in the meta. This is the deck to beat. This is currently the highest performing Loki deck. However, there's some easy substitutions here. Like if you don't have Nebula, you can use Agent 13. If you don't have Mirage, you can use Cable or Maria Hill even. The Moon Girl, obviously you have it in Pool 2, but Moon Girl just generates so much value with Loki in so many different ways, either before Loki, after Loki, it doesn't matter. It's a fantastic deck, and you're probably seeing a ton of it because it's that good. For the next two decks, we're going to be talking about them together because they have some similarities, but they're obviously different lists. What I will tell you though is I think that Shuri is an amazing spot right now, and if you're looking to confidently get to Infinite without Loki or any of the Season Pass stuff, this is one of the most inexpensive Pool 3 level decks that you can produce with a 66% win rate, and its meta share is starting to climb. I think people are starting to pick up on how good Shuri is. I've been talking about her for weeks, and this is the stock standard list. Honestly, it's just so damn good. Shuri Vision's excellent. Shuri Red Skull's excellent. You even have lines where you can like Shuri Vision and then Red Skull Ebony Maw if you've played the Sauron, of course. There's so many different lines, right? I really do like this list a lot. It is just truly remarkable how good it is, and it has some natural substitutions as well. Like if you're missing Typhoid Mare, for instance, you can use She-Hulk. She-Hulk is a very natural play in this deck because, for instance, if you skip turn 5, right, you play Shuri turn 4, you skip turn 5, She-Hulk becomes a 1 cost. You're able to play the Taskmaster plus She-Hulk together on turn 6 for a massive power slam. This deck is absolutely fantastic, and it's not to say that like there aren't other Shuri variations that are good too, and here's a good example of that. This deck here is a Shuri and Kitty Pryde based deck that just kind of roared onto the scene, and basically what you're doing here is like it's like almost like a Deadpool style deck where you're basically trying to pump up this Kitty Pryde hard over the first few turns, and you play your Shuri, and then you're able to like drop this Kitty, and it's absolutely massive, right? It's massive because if you've played Hulkbuster, if you've played Forge on the Kitty and all these things, what you've got is this really massive Kitty. You double it with the Shuri, and then on turn 6, you can legitimately just play Shuri plus Taskmaster because the mana allows that. But you also have the standard bylines of Shuri into Red Skull, Shuri into Vision, Shuri into whatever plus Taskmaster, right? So it still just works as a list. I like the splash of Kitty Pryde Angela, which has been a huge value addition in the current meta. Regardless, Shuri's in a fantastic spot right now, and although this deck has a lower win rate than the other one, I think it's fascinating and fun to play. I know everyone's sick of High Evolutionary because it like took over the meta over the last couple months, but like it's totally disrespected right now. And there are so many variations of High Evolutionary that are doing good. Last week I talked about Toxic Evolutionary, and this week just straight up High Evo with Doctor Doom. The newly buffed Doctor Doom is just winning. It has a 64% win rate. It matches favorably against Loki because they're taking all these vanilla cards, right? And that means in the mirror match, you have an advantage, right? You have an advantage because they're not getting the high evolutionary versions. So this pairs really well in the current meta. That's why the win rate's so high. It has a very good play pattern. Cyclops still absolutely claps with Storm. There's so much about this deck that just works. It just works. And so if you're looking to get to Infinite, if you're looking to compete in Conquest, especially if you're going against a lot of Loki decks, High Evolutionary has definitely got your back. While Destroy's win rate is not in the 60 percentile like some of its competing decks, it occupies nearly a 10% of the meta share and is just quite frankly really popular right now, and this is the leading list. The X23 Forge based list where you run up your Deadpool is just too good to pass up on because of the value that X23 provides. That Deadpool just constantly feels free if you got that constant cycle of X23 being destroyed, and so you're able to even cheat out things like Null and Death faster. You're able to play the Deadpool and Taskmaster confidently on turn 6. There are so many variations that you can pull off because if you have that 7 energy, you can play Null and Deadpool on turn 6. So this deck really does provide the Destroy player with a lot of different options. Despite the lower win rate, it is capable of stealing and snatching 8 cubes from your opponent. Okay, so I got a bit of a hot take with regards to discard. Now, this is gaining in meta share. People are interested in playing discard, and that's cool. I love discard too. But at a 56% win rate, I think there are better options in the current meta. So when I'm reporting on this, I'm reporting on the popularity of the list. It's definitely increasing in popularity. It's trending upward, but the win rate is not. The win rate is remaining relatively consistent in the mid 50 percentile range, which is kind of awkward when you have High Evolutionary into the 60s and you have all these decks that are generally pushing win rates near 60%. 50% and above. So yes, I get the desire to play discard. I love it too, but it's simply just not performing as good as the others. And I think what's increasing its play rate is the nerf to Spider Ham. People are feeling much more confident in it. But what's interesting is that the Blade version currently is not even the highest win rate version. So the buff to Blade, we quite haven't gotten it to the point where it's leveling up the discard as a whole. So if you want to play discard, this is the leading deck right now. But overall, I do think there are better choices in the meta. Alright, so here's a deck that just simply won't go away, and it's Shinod. Its meta share has actually dropped over the last couple weeks, which is kind of funny because you did get a nerf to Legion, which destroyed this deck. You also have not been seeing as much Sarah control, despite it being a good performer that we'll talk about later. The deck still claps, honestly, and this is currently the leading version of it. It still runs Leech. Leech is fantastic, although it doesn't do as well against Loki, especially in Conquest, because if they know you have Leech, they can dump their hand faster and earlier because of the cost reduction of Loki's effect. But overall, it's just a good deck. It's just a good deck. And it's kind of crazy because I think Magic has more room to breathe because of the nerf to Loki and the lack of Scarlet Witch we're seeing out there right now. And Storm isn't exactly in many lists either, outside of some of the discard and Surfer stuff, which isn't even that popular, right? Surfer's definitely not as popular as it used to be. So I think there's a lot of options for Shinod. I think it's a deck that you can win with, and currently it still represents an excellent choice in the meta. In our prior discussion about Shinod, we discussed how the lack of Sarah control in the current meta is giving Shinod a bit more room to breathe. And that's interesting because this deck is running a 60% win rate, and I'm bringing it up in this meta report because it's actually waning in popularity despite having a far higher win rate than some of the decks that people are playing, which kind of surprises me. This deck kind of does it all. It has the power, it's got the verticality. Bishop still does well with Mysterio and Hitmonkey. You have the Enchantress and Shang-Chi, which just provide you with answers. Scarlet Witch eats Shinod decks for breakfast because they just can't skip those turns. And of course, you got the combination of Kitty Pryde and Angela, which seems like an absolute staple in the current meta. This deck just performs at 60%, but very few people are playing it. Maybe it's been around too long. Maybe this deck has basically been consistent since January and people are just sick of it. That's entirely possible. But if you're looking for a good deck that just answers the meta, this is one that does it. So I wanted to show you something spicy, a little anti-meta splash for the Loki everyone's seeing, and we got Cerebro 3 at 56% win rate, and it matches pretty favorably against Loki because, like, think about it, you play Loki down, it's a 3-5, and you get a bunch of C3 cards. You've already screwed up the C3 because you just played Loki at a 5, right? So it's a disproportionate kind of game style because you still can get the C3 value, and they've messed up their C3 by playing Loki in the first place, right? So that's a favorable matchup. The concern is, like, it just doesn't match well against Shuri at all, which is pretty predominant in the meta, and the reason why you gotta run Shang-Chi for sure, right? So it doesn't match against all decks that well, but if you hate Loki, it's a pretty good choice. And you know what? It's fun to play something different, right? It has a very unique play pattern, and ultimately, I like Cerebro. They're fun, but it's a bit of a meme to some extent because it's not going to match as well against some of the other meta decks available. Silky Smooth has dropped in popularity like a rock since the changes to Captain Marvel, but you know what? It's still running a 61% win rate. It's still good. If you're wondering about how this deck was doing, I mean, now it actually, few people are playing it, so the ultimate thing here is now you just got a little more room to do what you want to do with the deck. It's still good. Silk, still good. Still interesting. Jeff, still one of the best cards in the game. Cap Marvel feels a little worse, but still performs in this deck because of the fact that you have Kraven that gives the buffs, and it just is a deck that works. And I kind of like that, like, this deck remained resilient despite the fact that it got hit with multiple nerfs to Captain Marvel, Legion, and others. But overall, I think that this is overall a decent choice for anybody still looking to play something a little spicy and a little different in the meta. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.